Hey YouTube, welcome back to Dwayne's World. So today, or wait a second, it's actually tonight, we're going to be doing the backlap on the Calfornia Trimmer I've been talking about for the last couple weeks. And with that, you better stay tuned. All right, so some of you may be curious, well, Dwayne, what's taking so long to be able to put out this backlapping video? Because you've been talking about it for the last couple weeks. And you're right, I have been talking about it for the last couple weeks. And the reason for the delay was ultimately because of that bad batch of perennial rye seed that I got when I first did my overseeding project. Now, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, you can go back on my channel. You'll be able to see the videos where I actually had to do a second overseeding about a week and a half to 2 weeks after I did my initial overseeding. And that ultimately delayed everything by about 2 weeks, if not a little bit longer. The reason why I say a little bit longer is because by the time I laid down that second batch of seed, the temperatures were already starting to drop, the soil temperatures were even getting cooler, and that absolutely affects the germination and how quickly perennial rye will germinate. Now, it's not that it didn't germinate, it came in great, but at the same time, it probably took a few extra days than maybe it wouldn't have had I had that seed when the temperatures were a little bit warmer. Now, I've talked about this before on my channel. I do not like to do things for the sake of the channel. I like to do things more real time, meaning I'll never backlap my mower when I don't need to backlap my mower. So because of the fact that I want to get my mower set now for the perennial rye, which is ready to mow, now is the time to backlap, and that's why there's been that delay. And with that, no more delay. Let's get to the backlap. I'll walk you guys through what I have here in front of me so you guys will know what's required in order to backlap your Calfornia trimmer. Now, if you haven't picked one up, I would highly, highly recommend picking up the Calfornia Trimmer Backlapping Kit, as you guys can see here in the middle of the screen. The backlapping kit will actually consist of 4 different things. You'll get a kickstand, which will basically allow you to be able to lift the front of your mower to make backlapping that much easier. You'll get a little tub of 80 grit compound. You'll get a sprocket adapter that you absolutely will need in order to complete your backlap. And the other thing you'll get that I do not have shown here is a paintbrush that Calfornia Trimmer does provide to you in order for you to do a backlap. Now, the paintbrush I have here is a little bit different, and it's not the one that's included in the kit. The other thing you absolutely want to make sure you have on hand is a variable speed drill. The variable speed drill will make it that much easier for you to be able to run your reel in reverse and be able to lower or increase the speed because of the variable trigger. The other thing you'll need is some basic hand tools in order to be able to remove the chain guard from the Calfornia Trimmer. You'll want an adjustable wrench so you're able to adjust the reel to bed knife clearance. The other thing that I also show here that's a little more optional is 120 grit compound, and I'll explain how I use that as I'm going through the backlapping process, along with the feeler gauge that I'll also show you guys as I'm going through the backlap. And with that, let's go ahead and remove the chain guard so we can go ahead and start the backlap. All right, so in order to remove the chain guard, it's very straightforward. You basically have 2 1/2-inch bolts, one here and one here, held on with the 1/2-inch nut on the opposite side of the mower frame. I'm going to go ahead and remove those so I can gain access to underneath the chain guard. Now, there's a lot of grease on this chain here, which is good because that means it's lubricated. But at the same time, I'm going to have to wipe off some of the grease here for me to be able to find my master link. And it's, as you can see, it's right there. So I'm going to go ahead and use my flathead screwdriver and be able to take off the master link. All right. Now I'm just going to go ahead and set my chain to the side. Use my chain guard to be able to hold everything so I don't lose anything as it relates to the master link along with the bolts. One thing I'm just going to check before I go ahead and do my backlap is I want to go ahead and see if it's cutting paper the way it sits right now. Now, the last time I used this mower, I did scalp my front yard. So with that being said, I know I definitely put it through its paces, so I'm just curious at this point whether or not it'll still cut paper or not, and I'm going to go ahead and test that. Surprisingly enough, I still got a cut there. Looks like a cut for the most part. It doesn't feel as sharp but it's still cutting paper. Yep. Now, even though this is cutting paper across the bed knife, I still want to go ahead and do a backlap, because when I go ahead and cut my perennial rye using this Calfornia trimmer for the first time, I want to make sure that it actually is really, really sharp. And that's important in order to get a good quality of cut and that you keep your grass healthy. Now, I'm surprised that I'm not surprised that it actually is still cutting paper even after doing that scalp. The reason why I'm not surprised is just because of the fact that I only cut about 700 square feet when I was scalping my front lawn. All right, so one of the things I noticed as I'm filming this, and this might have even been one of the reasons why it was a little bit difficult to spin my reel on certain revolutions, is there's a ton of dirt that's at the bottom of my bed knife here. So I'm probably going to clean this off a little bit before I go ahead and backlap. But that dirt absolutely will dull your blades. So this is why, again, even though I'm able to get it to cut paper, I absolutely want to backlap it just because there's been a lot of dirt that has accumulated here on the bed knife. Now, the dirt itself isn't a problem. But what that tells me, though, is as I was mowing, I absolutely was hitting dirt. And that is definitely bad for your reel and will definitely put some wear on it. Now, one of the things that I want to make sure that I do before I go ahead and backlap, and this is where my little feeler gauge is going to come in, because the feeler gauge is going to ensure that my reel is set properly from left to right. Now, I talked about this during my reel to bed knife adjustment on the Calfornia trimmer, but it is crucial whenever you go ahead and backlap that it is the same distance from the reel to bed knife, or as close to the same distance on the reel to bed knife on the left side or the right side. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and put my feeler gauge in here, and what I'm starting with is a .005, which is a 0.13 millimeter gauge. Now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just basically set it on the bed knife here. And all I'm feeling for is I want to see if I'm able to get it to go across the reel and bed knife. The purpose of why I'm doing this, I'm kind of feeling to see how much resistance I'm getting as I'm running this reel across this metal shim. Now, for example, if I was getting a lot of resistance on one side, but not so much resistance on the other side, I would absolutely say that I have to adjust the reel to bed knife because it's not even from one side to the other. However, being that I went through it right now, it felt pretty good. It felt fairly consistent from one side to the other. And with that, being that I feel like it's fairly even on the left and right side, I'm going to go ahead and start the backlap. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start with my 80 grit compound. Now, 80 grit absolutely is what you should be using, and is generally what's used whenever you are backlapping a powered reel mower. The 120 grit compound, and I'll basically show you guys how I use that, is more of an optional step. You do not need the 120 in order to properly backlap your mower. At the same time, something you can use, and I'll show you how I use it as I go through the backlapping process. However, I'm going to go ahead and start with the 80 grit. So what I like to do, and I think this is a trick that Doc does on his YouTube channels whenever he backlaps, and now by no means am I endorsing how Doc backlaps is the right way to backlap, but one thing that I know that I liked about the way what he was doing is he basically just brushed some of the compound onto the reel to get it going. That's about the only process that I would say as it relates to backlapping that I would agree with whenever he backlaps his mowers. Outside of those things, I'll leave it up to you whether or not you want to follow his advice or not. But I do have my own backlapping videos. If you are trying to learn how to backlap a McLean, I do have those featured on my channel. All right, so I'm just going to basically go ahead and go all the way around the reel. Now, one thing you might have noticed is I did not adjust the reel to bed knife as it relates to the clearance. Now, if I go ahead and start backlapping and it has a really, really difficult time turning the reel in reverse, I may back it off slightly. And the only reason why I would want to do that is just to be able to allow the reel to spin a little more freely. I don't want to burn up my drill. Right, so normally when I go ahead and backlap, though, I'll tell you, most of the time the way I have my reel to bed knife set is always fairly more loose than it is tight. So I generally don't run into that problem with it being overly tight when I backlap, just because of the way I normally set the reel to bed knife clearance on my reel mowers. All right, so as you guys could hear, I absolutely have already made a revolution. Now, one recommendation I do make is just get some cardboard or something that I have already placed here underneath my mower. It's going to make it a little bit easier for cleanup. So that way you don't run into a problem having to clean up all this compound off of your garage floor or wherever you're backlapping. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab my drill and start the actual backlap. Now, generally, when it comes to backlapping, you should probably backlap for anywhere between 3 and 5 minutes. All right, so basically, I'm going to go ahead and take my drill, attach my adapter. This is a 1/2 inch socket again. And I'm going to come over here to the side of the reel. Let me go ahead and just move my camera. Basically now with this adapter, as you guys can see here, it fits over the reel sprocket. So that's going to allow me to be able to spin my reel in reverse to be able to run that compound to be able to sharpen my blades. All right, so now what I'm going to do, now that I have it spun a couple revolutions, is I'm going to go ahead and start my drill. And I don't need to go crazy fast to start. I can go ahead and give it just a little bit of pressure. And all I'm doing is I'm painting the compound on the reel. So now all I'm going to do is let it spin for a few minutes here. Before I go ahead and re-spin this reel in reverse, I wanted to just stop for a second here and just kind of explain what I'm doing. I'm basically listening now as the reel spins in reverse. And when I'm listening, I'm basically hearing what it sounds like, and basically you can almost hear as if that compound is wearing away. So now when I go ahead and start it back up and apply more compound, the sound will change, and you guys will hear that as I'm running it in reverse. So hopefully you guys can hear, it's almost sounding like it's quieting down, and that's telling me that the compound is basically wearing itself off, and the blades are getting sharper as I'm going through and doing this. I'm going to go ahead and apply more compound. And as you guys can see there, it's definitely spinning a lot freer, and the sound has completely changed. So now what I can do is, if I knew my reel needed a lot of help, I would basically tighten my reel to bed knife screws here. As you guys can see at the top of the mower, I basically tightened the same amount here and the same amount on the other side. Now, because of the fact that my mower was not in really, really bad shape, I'm not going to do that. The only adjustment I'm going to make is when I go to set the reel and bed knife after I wash off this compound. That is the only adjustment. But if you have a mower that you're maybe picked up secondhand and the reel you need to bring really back to life, you want to go ahead and tighten that down the same amount on each side and continue to backlap for, again, another 3 to 5 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to run my reel here with a little more compound on it because I haven't quite done it for 5 minutes. All right, so it's been about 5 minutes now. Now, this is the only thing that I may do a little bit differently than some other people. So generally at this point, you could probably go ahead and stop, wash off your reel, and go ahead and test your reel to bed knife. But what I'm going to do rather than stop at this point is I'm going to switch compounds and basically go with the 120 grit compound in place of the 80 grit. It's mainly for cosmetic reasons. I just like the way it looks after you run the 120 on it, and it just makes it look that much sharper and gives it a much better appearance than just leaving it again at the 80 grit. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and grab my 120 grit and apply it to the reel. All right, as you guys can see here, I have the 120 grit loaded on my paintbrush, and I'm going to go ahead now and start lapping with the 120 grit. All right, as you guys can hear there and see there, it definitely started spinning up a lot freer as that compound went to work. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and rinse off the mower. I'm going to go ahead and take it outside with the garden hose and then basically just go ahead and rinse off all this compound. One of the things you absolutely do not want to do, and trust me when I say this, is do not run this reel forward at this point. Get all of your compound off of your reel before you do any type of paper test. So generally what I'll do is I'll rinse it all down, and as I'm rinsing it, I'm going to continue to spin the reel in reverse. Do not spin it forward. A lot of people make this mistake where they try to do a paper test here, and this is not when you want to do a paper test. You want to get all the compound off. I normally will use my blower then to dry the mower, and then I'll go ahead and do my paper test. Okay, so now I washed off all the compound. I still have a little bit of compound on my grass shield, as I can see here, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and probably rinse it down again afterwards. But the main point right now is I just wanted to get all the compound off the reel and off the bed knife so I can go ahead and paper test it. Now, I believe it should be cutting. Now, this is where some people may wonder, well, I sharpened it. How come it's not cutting now? Well, you got to remember, anytime you're backlapping, you are removing a small amount of material from both the bed knife and the reel. And if basically your tolerances have opened up, you may have to make a slight adjustment to bring that reel to bed knife a little bit closer in order to get it to cut paper. We'll see what happens. Generally, a lot of times for me, it does end up cutting paper right away. But if it doesn't, I don't want you guys to freak out. All you need to do is do a small adjustment. And you can look at my reel to bed knife adjustment video as it relates to the Calfornia Trimmer, as I have some additional tips in there to be able to help you guys out. And with that, let's go ahead and do a paper test. Got a good cut there. All right, so what I'm going to do, because I didn't get such a clean cut on the right side there, I'm going to go ahead and do a slight adjustment, and ever so slight. And let me go ahead and move my camera around so you guys can see. Right, so now that I have my camera adjusted, I'm basically going to tighten the reel to bed knife. So basically I'm going to bring it closer together. And the way you'll do that is by using this adjustment post here, by turning it clockwise. Now clockwise, again, will bring the reel to bed knife closer to each other. If you want to increase the gap, you will go counterclockwise. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the same amount on the right side as the left side, so I can make sure to keep my reel straight from left to right. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and give it a slight tighten. All right, so all I'm going to do is I'm probably going to turn it, not even, maybe a quarter turn is all I'm looking for. About, not even less than that. So probably about that. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the opposite side. Probably good right there. All right, so I did an adjustment on it. It still feels pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do a paper test. Right side of the reel to start. Nice cut there as we come to the middle. Nice cut there. Coming all the way to the left side here. Nice cut and all the way over. And we are good. Absolutely loving it. Now this mower is absolutely ready to cut the perennial rye. All right, so one of the things I like to do is I like to apply a little bit of rust and corrosion protection to my reel and bed knife. Now, in the past, I've used things like WD-40, which absolutely work really well. But one of the recommendations I got from a fellow YouTuber, his name is Sonny Bermuda. Now, if you don't know who Sonny Bermuda is, look for his channel on YouTube. He has some great content. He's a reel mower guy. He features a lot of great outlets on his channel. I definitely love watching his content, and I think you guys will love it too. So please make sure to give him a like, subscribe to his channel, especially if you are a lawn enthusiast like I am. But one of the things that he recommended was this stuff called fluid film. And this fluid film is basically similar to WD-40, but in my opinion works much better to provide longer protection on your reel and bed knife. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and spray some of this on a rag and basically just wipe down my reel. Now the only thing I would say I'm not a huge fan of when it comes to this fluid film is the smell. That's about the only thing. It works really great, but the stuff does not have the most pleasant of smells. So, and it's not that it smells horrible. It's different than any other type of lubricant I've used in the past on my reel mower. So, but I definitely love the way it performs. It definitely does a great job in protecting the reel. So if you ever have the problem where whenever you go to turn your reel and it squeaks, go ahead and put this lubricant on there. It absolutely will quiet that down. You will not hear that. And definitely, especially if your mower, as we go into winter here, tends to sit for a little bit longer, This protection is absolutely something you would want to do to ensure you do not get any type of surface rust or whatnot on your reel. All right, so now I feel really good about the fact that this backlap's done, and I feel very comfortable about using my Calfornia trimmer on my perennial rye because I know now it's going to do a phenomenal job in cutting the turf. Now, one of the things I will say, though, is this backlapping video was very straightforward. And the reason why it was very straightforward was because of the fact that the reel and bed knife were really not in that bad a shape. And that's what I always prefer to do my backlap, is not necessarily when it doesn't need it, but rather when it's kind of in that middle point where I could probably get away with not doing it, or I can get away with doing it. And I always choose to do it, so that way I maintain the reel and bed knife and keep it sharp. That makes the next backlap that much easier. The other thing I'll say is really be careful about what you're mowing. So try to only mow grass. I know that sounds funny, but whenever you're mowing over things like twigs or you have small pebbles or rocks, those kind of things will affect the ability of that reel and bed knife to stay sharp. So always be mindful of what you're mowing, and if you're truly just mowing grass, your reel and bed knife should not be taking that much wear, and you can maintain it season after season after season by doing a proper backlap. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. As always, be excellent and party on.